The carriage overturned at the bend before Blackthorn Bridge. Wood splintered. Horses screamed. And as the Duke of Northwood struck his head against the iron frame, the last sight that burned into his fading vision was not terror, but his Duchess smiling through the shattered window. Not fear, satisfaction. Darkness claimed him before he could understand it. When Elliot Hawthorne, Duke of Northwood, awakened, he did not move. He did not breathe differently. He did not open his eyes, but he heard everything. The impact has destroyed his reason, the physician announced gravely inside the dim bedchamber of Hawthorne Manor. His grace may linger in this state for weeks, perhaps months. But the mind we knew is gone. A pause, soft rehearsed sobbing. "How dreadful," Duchess Phoebe whispered. Her gloved hand brushed his wrist. Her touch was warm. Her voice was not. When the chamber cleared and only silence remained, she leaned closer. Her breath grazed his ear. "Finally," she murmured. The word struck harder than the carriage wheel ever had. "I thought I would have to endure your tedious lectures forever." Inside his frozen body, fury ignited like wildfire through dry timber. He had married Phoebe Layton 3 years ago, believing her clever, spirited, curious about estate matters. He had trusted her with accounts, correspondence, even council discussions. And now, the accident was executed perfectly, she continued softly. The weakened axle, the startled horses. You always insisted on inspecting the bridge road yourself. How predictable. The Duke's heart thundered, though his body betrayed nothing. "Another few days," she went on, pacing slowly across the oak floor. "Perhaps a week. Once your breathing ceases, the regency will fall naturally to me. The forged will is already secured, and Lord Ashford grows impatient." Victor Ashford, the name cut deeper than any blade. Ashford, his political rival. A charming, reckless viscount drowning in debt and resentment. Elliot understood at once. This was not merely greed, it was conspiracy. Phoebe returned to the bedside and lifted something from the coverlet, his signet ring. The hawthorn crest glinted in the candlelight. "I shall require this," she said lightly. The London bankers respond swiftly to a sealed instruction from a grieving Duchess. She bent lower. "I almost feel remorse," she breathed. "You were never cruel, merely dull, obsessed with land yields and tenant reforms." Her laugh was low and musical, the same laugh that had enchanted half the ballroom on their wedding night beneath crystal chandeliers. "And I am so very tired of pretending devotion." Her lips brushed his forehead, cold silk, colder in tint. When she withdrew, he heard the door close, and only then did Elliot allow the full force of his rage to surge. But he did not move. He would not. A duke survived by calculation, not impulse. If his Duchess believed him unconscious, then he would remain so, for now. The journey back to Hawthorne Manor lasted 3 hours. He felt each violent jolt of the wagon, felt the bitter winter air seep through the furs covering his rigid form. He heard the butler weep quietly. He heard servants whisper prayers. He heard Phoebe's carriage arrive ahead of them. By the time they carried him up the grand staircase lined with ancestral portraits, word had already begun spreading across Northumberland. The Duke was lost. They laid him upon the massive 4-poster bed in the master chamber, dark oak panels looming overhead like judges. Mrs. Bramwell, the housekeeper who had served his family since childhood, sobbed openly. "Oh, your grace," she whispered as she bathed his temples. "You do not deserve this." If only he could reassure her. Instead, he lay still while the physician pried open his eyelids and muttered confidently about brain fever. "He hears nothing," the doctor concluded. "He feels nothing." How very wrong. When the room emptied once more, Phoebe approached again. No tears this time, only calculation. 3 years, she said quietly, while rifling through his desk drawers. 3 years of smiling at provincial nobles and nodding at your speeches on agricultural reform. She opened his personal ledger. Her breath hitched. £50,000 in London alone. A sharp intake of greedy delight. "You are worth more dead than alive, Elliot." She moved toward the wardrobe next. "Victor shall be relieved, his creditors grow restless." There it was. Not even caution now. She believed him gone. "We will marry in France," she continued dreamily. "A respectable interval of mourning, of course. Society adores a grieving widow." She returned to the bedside and studied him. "I wonder how long it takes a man to bleed internally," she mused. Inside his motionless body, something shifted. A tremor. Small, barely perceptible. But someone saw. In the corner of the room stood a newly hired maid, quiet, unassuming, easily ignored. Her gaze sharpened. She had seen the Duke's finger move, just once, and she did not look afraid. She looked resolved. That night, long after the manor slept, the chamber door creaked open again. Soft steps, not Phoebe's. A whisper. "I know you can hear me, Your Grace." His heart stopped. "I saw your hand move." Silence stretched between them. Then, "Move your finger once if I'm correct." He gathered every shred of will, every ounce of pride, every fragment of fury, and his finger twitched. The girl inhaled sharply. "My name is Clara Hartwell," she whispered. "And your late father hired me to watch the Duchess." The room seemed to tilt. "He suspected her long before you did." A pause. "He died suddenly, did he not?" The Duke lay still, but in the darkness hope flickered. Not all was lost. Not yet. Clara did not tremble. That more than her words steadied him. "I was placed here 6 months before his late grace passed," she continued in a whisper. "Your father believed the Duchess too attentive to correspondence, too curious regarding bank seals and council letters." A pause. "I was to observe, nothing more." Elliot forced his hand to move again. A faint twitch. Clara exhaled. "You must remain as you are," she urged. "If her grace suspects even the slightest recovery, she will not wait for nature to finish what she began." Her words were calm, measured, but beneath them lay urgency. "She has already altered documents," Clara went on. "A will dated 2 weeks before the accident. A declaration of permanent incapacity to be presented before the king's northern representative. And tonight." The door latch shifted faintly in the corridor. Clara stepped back instantly, lowering her gaze as the Duchess entered. Phoebe was dressed in black silk trimmed with jet beads. Widow's mourning, though her husband yet breathed. "How devoted you are," she said lightly to Clara, watching over him so diligently. "It is my duty, Your Grace." Phoebe approached the bed. She leaned close again, inspecting Elliot's face. Her perfume, violet and something sharper beneath, filled the air. "The winter assembly remains scheduled," she said aloud, almost conversationally. "Canceling would invite speculation." Clara remained silent. Phoebe's gloved fingers brushed Elliot's jaw. "I shall address the guests personally," she continued. "Explain that my dear husband's mind is forever lost." She smiled faintly, "and that I must assume stewardship of the estate." There it was. Power, not grief, not sorrow, ambition. Phoebe turned away, pacing toward the hearth. "Viscount Ashford agrees it is best done publicly. Sympathy will silence dissent." Clara's hands tightened in her apron folds. Elliot lay rigid. The assembly. In 4 nights' time, half the northern nobility would gather beneath Hawthorne Manor's chandeliers, and his wife intended to declare him finished. "Forever." Phoebe turned again. "Have cook prepare the restorative broth tonight," she instructed coolly. "The special tincture I provided must be added. Precisely 3 drops. Clara bowed her head. "Yes, Your Grace." When Phoebe departed, the air felt colder. Clara moved swiftly to the bedside. "She carries poison," she whispered. "Bitter almond tincture. I smelled it when she handed the vial to cook." Elliot's heart pounded violently. His father, the sudden illness, the untouched carafe at his bedside. Everything aligned. She believes the assembly will grant her legitimacy, Clara continued. "If you die quietly after her announcement, no one will question it." He forced his eyes to open a fraction, just enough to see her clearly. "Can you move your foot?" she asked softly. He tried. Pain shot up his spine like lightning, but his toe shifted. "Barely." Clara smiled, small, fierce. "Good." She adjusted the blankets carefully. "We have 4 nights. You must regain strength enough to stand." 4 nights. To rise from the grave his Duchess had prepared. To expose her before the realm. To reclaim his name. Clara leaned closer. "I have begun collecting evidence. Copies of forged documents, notes of overheard conversations. If something happens to either of us, they will be delivered to London." Her courage stunned him. A maid, alone against a Duchess. And yet she did not falter. Footsteps echoed again in the hall. Clara straightened instantly, lifting a cloth to his forehead as Phoebe re-entered briefly.
"Has he stirred?" the Duchess asked sharply.
"No, Your Grace." Phoebe studied him. Her gaze lingered. Searching, suspicious. Elliot slowed his breathing deliberately. Empty, still, dead to the world. After a tense moment, Phoebe gave a small nod. "Good." She left once more. Only when the door closed did Elliot allow the smallest exhale. Clara's voice dropped even further. "She grows impatient." In the corridor, servants whispered of changes. Mrs. Bramwell was to retire. The steward dismissed. New faces hired, loyal to Phoebe. The Duchess was tightening her hold before the assembly. "Tomorrow night," Clara said, "we attempt sitting upright." His body felt like stone. His head throbbed. But beneath the weakness, something else grew. Cold resolve. Phoebe believed him dull, predictable, manageable. She had misjudged him gravely. A duke did not surrender his estate to treachery, and if she wished to play at morning, he would give her a resurrection. From the darkness of his prisoned body, Elliot Hawthorne began to plan. The following evening, thunder rolled across the moors. Rain struck the tall windows of Hawthorne Manor like impatient fingers, and within the Duke's chamber, Clara barred the door quietly before approaching the bed. "It must be now," she whispered. "She dines with Lord Ashford in the west drawing-room. The servants are occupied." Elliot's eyes opened fully. The effort no longer burned as it had before. Weakness remained, but control had begun to return. Clara slipped one arm behind his shoulders. "Slowly, Your Grace." He clenched his jaw and forced his elbows beneath him. The world tilted violently. Darkness threatened again, but he did not yield. With Clara's steady guidance, he rose, inch by inch, until he was sitting upright for the first time since the carriage overturned. His breath came ragged, his vision swam, but he was upright. Clara's eyes shone. "Good," she murmured, "very good." Below, faint laughter drifted up the staircase. Phoebe's voice, light, musical.
False.
Elliot stiffened. "Can you stand?" Clara asked. He hesitated only a moment before nodding. She braced herself and drew him carefully to his feet. His legs trembled like a newborn foal's. He swayed, then steadied. His hand gripped the bedpost. He was standing. The Duke of Northwood stood in his own chamber while the woman plotting his death toasted his absence below. A sound echoed in the corridor. Clara froze. Voices. Approaching. She guided him swiftly back to the mattress just as the latch turned. Phoebe entered without knocking. She wore emerald silk tonight, not morning black. Her cheeks were flushed from wine. Victor Ashford followed behind her. Elliot forced his body limp once more. "I dislike this waiting," Victor said coolly. "The assembly draws near." Phoebe approached the bed, studying Elliot's face. "I told you," she said, "he cannot move." Victor stepped closer, gaze cold. "Perhaps we should hasten matters." Phoebe's eyes flicked toward the door. "The physician visits each morning." "And?" Victor's voice sharpened. "A man in such a state might simply fail." Silence. Elliot lay still, but inside something sharpened. Phoebe leaned nearer to him. "So stubborn," she murmured softly as if addressing a child. "Even now." Then she straightened. "Tomorrow night," she said to Victor. "After the assembly announcement." Victor smiled faintly. "France awaits us." They left together. Clara remained motionless for several heartbeats before rushing back to Elliot's side. "They will poison you tomorrow night," she whispered urgently, immediately after her declaration. Elliot's jaw tightened. "No." The word emerged hoarse but unmistakable. Clara's eyes widened. "You must not speak yet." "Tomorrow," he rasped, gathering strength. "I attend." She stared at him in disbelief. "You cannot possibly walk the ballroom." His gaze hardened. "She declares me gone before the realm?" he whispered. "Then I rise before them." A long silence stretched between them. Fear flickered in Clara's eyes, but so did admiration. "They will not expect it," she said slowly. "No." He straightened slightly against the pillows. "They believe me powerless." The faintest, coldest smile touched his mouth. "Let them." Outside, thunder cracked over the estate. Within Hawthorne Manor, something had shifted. The Duke was no longer merely surviving. He was preparing. And tomorrow night, under crystal chandeliers and watchful noble eyes, the Duchess would learn what it meant to underestimate a man who had nothing left to lose. The morning of the winter assembly dawned sharp and silver. Frost clung to the iron gates of Hawthorne Manor. Inside, servants hurried through corridors heavy with candle smoke and anticipation. Crystal chandeliers were lowered and polished. Silver trays gleamed. Florists arranged white roses in towering vases, Phoebe's choice. Funereal, symbolic. Clara stood at the window of Elliot's chamber, watching carriages begin to arrive before dusk had fully fallen. "She means to make a spectacle of grief," Clara murmured. Elliot was already dressed, not in his usual evening coat, but in a dark robe lined with velvet, chosen for warmth and concealment. He could stand without assistance now. He could walk several paces unsteady but determined, and his voice, though still rough, carried strength enough to be heard. "She has dismissed Mrs. Bramwell," Clara said quietly. Elliot turned sharply. "What?" "She ordered her retirement this morning, a small pension, immediate departure." Rage tightened his chest. Mrs. Bramwell had served his mother before him. "She removes loyalty," Clara continued. "She prepares for complete control." Elliot's gaze hardened. "Where is Bramwell now?" "In her quarters, packing." He crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate. Clara moved to assist him, but he waved her back. He would walk alone. When they reached the housekeeper's chamber, Mrs. Bramwell gasped at the sight of him standing in the doorway. "Your Grace," Tears flooded her face. He steadied himself against the doorframe. "I am not gone," he said firmly. Her sob became a laugh of disbelief. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew my boy would not surrender so easily." Elliot stepped inside. "Do not leave," he told her. "Tonight, remain in the ballroom. Watch closely." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "She plans something," Mrs. Bramwell breathed. "Yes." He did not elaborate. He did not need to. By 8 o'clock, the ballroom shimmered with silk and jewels. Candles blazed beneath the grand chandelier. Nobles in tailored coats and jeweled tiaras whispered beneath painted ceilings depicting Hawthorne victories long past. Phoebe stood at the center of it all, radiant, resplendent, and draped in widow's black once more. Her emerald necklace glittered at her throat, and hanging beneath it, his signet ring. She touched it absently as she greeted Lord Ashworth, the king's northern representative. "My husband would have wished for continuity," she said with soft composure. "Stability." Ashworth inclined his head gravely. "His Majesty values the Duke's stewardship." Phoebe lowered her eyes. "I shall do my utmost to honor it." Applause rippled politely around them. Victor Ashford lingered near the dais, watchful, satisfied. At precisely 9, the musicians fell silent. Phoebe ascended the small platform at the ballroom's far end. "My friends," she began, voice trembling with rehearsed fragility, "we gather tonight under the heaviest of shadows." The room quieted. "As you know, my beloved husband has not stirred since the dreadful accident." A murmur of sympathy. "The physicians have confirmed what I long feared. Though his body endures, his mind has departed us." Gasps. She pressed a lace handkerchief to her lips. "It falls to me, therefore, to assume regency over the Hawthorne estate." The doors at the rear of the ballroom creaked open, not loudly, but unmistakably. A draft swept inward. Heads turned. A single figure stood in the doorway. Tall, pale, unmistakable. The Duke of Northwood. Walking. Silence fell like a blade. Phoebe's voice faltered mid-sentence. Her hand tightened around the signet ring at her throat. Elliot took one step forward. Then another. The chandeliers caught his face. The scars at his temple. The fury in his eyes. "Forgive me," he said evenly, his voice carrying across the stunned assembly. "I seem to have missed my own funeral." The ballroom erupted in whispers. Phoebe did not move. Her expression, shock, horror, calculation, flickered in rapid succession. "Elliot," she breathed, descending the dais slowly. "You should not be out of bed." He stopped at the center of the floor. His gaze never left hers. "On the contrary," he replied quietly. "I have never been more awake." And in that moment, the balance of power shifted. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Phoebe reached him first. Her hand slid onto his arm, fingers cool, possessive. "My poor darling," she said loudly, her voice trembling for the audience. "The strain has clearly unsettled you. You must return upstairs at once." Her nails pressed into his sleeve. A warning, a plea.
A threat.
Elliot looked down at her hand, then at her face. Up close, beneath the candlelight, he saw what others did not. Not grief. Fear. "You seemed quite certain I would never stand here again," he said softly. A ripple moved through the crowd. Lord Ashworth stepped forward cautiously. "Your Grace, we were informed—" "That I was lost," Elliot finished calmly. "Yes, I heard that assessment myself." Phoebe's composure tightened. "You are confused," she insisted. "The fever." "The fever left me days ago." He gently removed her hand from his arm. The gesture was restrained, measured, but deliberate. Whispers sharpened. Victor Ashford shifted where he stood, color draining from his face. Elliot turned slowly, addressing the room. "For 2 weeks I have lain in silence, unable to move, unable to speak, but entirely capable of hearing." Phoebe went still. Her breath caught just once. "And I heard," Elliot continued evenly, "discussions regarding forged wills, regarding Parisian bank accounts, regarding how swiftly one might hasten a husband's death without suspicion." Gasps scattered across the ballroom. Phoebe laughed. "Too quickly. This is absurd." "Is it?" He reached into the inner fold of his robe. Clara, standing near the musicians, felt her pulse thunder. But Elliot did not yet reveal the papers. Not yet. Instead, he stepped closer to Phoebe, close enough that only she could hear his next words. "You should have chosen patience over arrogance." Her eyes flickered. "You always underestimated me," she whispered through clenched teeth. "And you mistook restraint for weakness." For a fraction of a second, something shifted in her expression. Not guilt, not remorse, but frustration. "You were suffocating me," she said softly. "Your rules, your order, your endless duties. And you preferred chaos," he replied. "I preferred freedom." The admission hung between them. Too honest, too sharp. Several guests were watching now with open fascination. Clara stepped forward quietly and placed a small vial upon a nearby side table. It caught the candlelight. Bitter almonds. Phoebe's gaze snapped toward it. Elliot followed her glance. "Is this the freedom you desired?" he asked quietly. Her mask cracked, just slightly. "You have no proof," she said. But her voice trembled, and for the first time since he had awakened, Elliot felt not rage, but something far more dangerous: disappointment. He had once believed her capable of greatness beside him, believed her restless spirit might challenge him, sharpen him. Instead, she had chosen destruction. The ballroom waited, the air thick with scandal and suspended judgment. Phoebe drew herself upright. If she would fall fighting. "You are weak," she said loudly now, reclaiming her voice. "Delirious from injury. I have done nothing but protect this estate while you lay senseless." Victor nodded sharply. "The Duchess has acted with impeccable devotion." Elliot's eyes never left Phoebe's. "Then let us examine devotion." His fingers tightened around the hidden documents within his robe. But even now, even at the brink, he gave her one final chance. "Tell them," he said quietly, for her alone. "Confess. End this before it consumes you." Her chin lifted. Her voice hardened. "I will not." And in that refusal, whatever tenderness had once existed between them died completely. The silence that followed her refusal was heavier than any accusation. Elliot straightened to his full height. He swayed only slightly. No one dared assist him. No one dared interrupt. "You will not," he repeated quietly. Phoebe's spine stiffened. "I will not dignify the ramblings of a man scarcely recovered from a fractured skull." A few uneasy murmurs rose among the guests. Victor stepped forward now, adopting a tone of offended loyalty. "This is monstrous. The Duchess has governed with grace during His Grace's tragic decline. We all witnessed her devotion." Clara's hands tightened at her sides. Elliot reached into his robe at last. This time he withdrew the papers. "Devotion," he said, holding them aloft, "is not usually accompanied by forged seals." Lord Ashworth crossed the floor swiftly and accepted the documents. The crowd leaned inward like a tide. Phoebe did not move, but her knuckles whitened. Ashworth's brow furrowed as he examined the first page. "A will," he murmured. "Dated 2 weeks prior to the accident." Phoebe spoke quickly. "Yes, my husband and I discussed it at length." Elliot's voice cut cleanly through hers. "I was in Edinburgh that week." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Ashworth continued reading. "And this, a letter of transfer to a Parisian account, signed with the Duke's seal." Phoebe's gaze flickered involuntarily to the emerald pendant at her throat. Elliot followed the movement. "Perhaps," he said softly, "Her Grace would explain why she wears my signet ring concealed beneath her mourning jewels." All eyes shifted. Phoebe instinctively covered the necklace with her hand. Too late. Victor's composure cracked first. "This is political sabotage," he snapped. "An attempt to discredit a grieving wife." Clara stepped forward then, calm but unwavering. "And is the poison also political, my lord?" She lifted the small vial. The scent of bitter almond lingered faintly in the air. Phoebe's breath caught. "That was medicinal." "For a man who was already declared beyond recovery?" Clara asked gently. Ashworth's expression darkened. "Duchess," he said gravely, "is there an explanation you wish to offer before this proceeds further?" For the first time that evening, uncertainty crossed Phoebe's face. Not fear of Elliot, not fear of scandal, fear of consequence. She turned slowly toward him. "You should have died," she whispered, too low for most to hear. Elliot stepped closer. "So you ensured my father did first?" The words fell like a hammer. The ballroom erupted in horrified whispers. Phoebe recoiled. "You have no proof of that." "No," he said quietly. "Not yet." Ashworth folded the documents with care. "This matter will be investigated under Crown authority." Victor took a step backward. Guards near the entrance shifted. The air had changed entirely now. This was no longer marital dispute. It was treason. Phoebe's breathing quickened. Her carefully composed facade was splintering. "You were going to declare me permanently incapacitated tonight," Elliot said steadily, "to seize full regency." "I was preserving the estate," she cried. "You were emptying it." Their eyes locked. All the years between them, every dinner, every ballroom, every shared carriage ride, collapsed into this single moment of reckoning. "You never loved me," she said suddenly. The accusation stunned even him. "I offered you partnership," he replied quietly. "You offered me confinement." A flicker of something painful crossed his face, but it vanished just as quickly. "And so you chose murder." Her silence answered for her. Ashworth gestured subtly. 2 royal guards stepped forward. Phoebe's chin lifted once more. Even now, even cornered, she would not kneel, and yet beneath the candlelight something in her eyes finally wavered. Not remorse, but the dawning realization. She had miscalculated the man she married. The guards did not seize her at once. Regency blood, even tainted, was not handled crudely before witnesses. Ashworth stepped forward, voice steady but edged with authority. Duchess Phoebe Hawthorne, you stand accused of fraud against a peer of the realm, conspiracy to commit murder, and interference with crown finances. A collective murmur rippled through the ballroom. Phoebe did not struggle. She laughed. It was not the charming, silvery laugh Elliot had once admired. It was sharp, unraveled. Conspiracy? She echoed. Against whom? A man who preferred ledgers to his wife? A duke who treated his household like a regiment? Her gaze swept the crowd. You all applauded him, his discipline, his reforms, his endless sermons on responsibility. She looked back at Elliot. Did you ever ask whether I wish to be responsible? The room shifted uneasily. Elliot did not flinch. You wished for power, he said calmly. Yes, she snapped. Power to choose my own life. And you believed murder was choice? Silence. Victor Ashford attempted one final retreat. This is hysteria, he insisted. The Duchess is overwrought. Ashworth's eyes hardened. Viscount Ashford, your name appears upon these financial transfers. You will remain. Two guards moved to either side of him. Victor's shoulders sagged. Phoebe turned to Elliot once more. You would have kept me in that gilded cage until I withered, she said softly now, the rage draining into something colder. You never saw me. For the first time that evening, the accusation struck somewhere deeper than pride. Elliot's expression shifted. Not weakness, not guilt, but recognition. I saw ambition, he replied. I mistook it for partnership. You mistook it for obedience, she corrected. The crowd watched, breathless. This was no longer mere scandal. It was the collapse of a marriage played out beneath chandeliers. Clara stood still near the musicians, heart pounding but silent. Elliot drew one final breath before speaking. You had every opportunity to speak to me, to challenge me, to demand more than courtesy. Phoebe's smile returned, faint, tragic, and be dismissed like a troublesome child? He did not answer, perhaps because some small part of him feared the truth within her words. Ashworth stepped between them. This debate may continue in London. The guards approached at last. Phoebe did not fight them, but as they took her wrists, she leaned close enough for only Elliot to hear. You will be alone again, she whispered. Your precious North, your loyal servants, none of them will warm your bed. It was meant to wound. Perhaps once it would have. Now, it only revealed how little she understood him. He straightened, voice carrying once more. The Hawthorne name does not rest upon one marriage. Ashworth nodded to the guards. Victor was escorted first, pale and silent. Phoebe followed. Halfway across the ballroom she paused. Her eyes met Elliot's one last time, not pleading, not apologetic, simply defeated. The doors closed behind her. The chandeliers flickered in the sudden stillness, and for the first time since the carriage overturned, the Duke of Northwood stood without threat before him. But victory did not feel triumphant. It felt heavy, incomplete, because justice had been done, yet something irretrievable had been lost. The ballroom did not erupt into applause. It did not descend into chaos. Instead, a profound stillness settled beneath the chandeliers, as though the entire aristocratic world of Northumberland had witnessed not merely scandal, but reckoning. Lord Ashworth turned to Elliot with measured gravity. Your Grace, he said, loud enough for all to hear, the Crown will pursue this matter in London. Until such time, Hawthorne Manor remains under your sole authority. Sole authority. The words rang differently now. Elliot inclined his head. Thank you, my lord. The musicians did not resume. The assembly dissolved slowly, nobles departing in hushed clusters, their whispers already weaving legend from what they had seen. A duke risen from death, a duchess unmasked, a marriage shattered beneath candlelight. When the last carriage rolled away and the great doors were closed, silence reclaimed the manor. Only loyal staff remained. Mrs. Bramwell approached him first, tears shining openly. I knew you would return to us, she whispered. He took her hands. I nearly did not. Thomas the gardener bowed deeply. Cook wept apologies for the poisoned broth she had almost served. Elliot dismissed every apology with quiet reassurance. The fault was not yours. At the edge of the now dark ballroom stood Clara, no longer hidden in shadow, no longer merely a maid. She watched him carefully, as if uncertain whether he would collapse. He crossed the floor toward her, each step steadier than the last. You remained, he said. I gave my word to your father, she replied softly, and then to you. He studied her, truly studied her for the first time, not as a servant, not as a protector, but as a woman of courage. You saved my life. Her chin lifted slightly. You chose to rise. A quiet moment passed between them. Not romantic, not yet, but charged with something deeper. Mutual respect, trust born in crisis. Outside, dawn began to pale the horizon. The first light of morning filtered through the tall windows, washing away the remnants of candle smoke and scandal. Elliot turned toward it. For years, he said thoughtfully, I believed leadership meant control, order, authority without question. Clara waited. I see now it also requires listening. A faint smile touched her lips. The North remembers, she said. He looked at her sharply. It was a phrase he had spoken once before, during a tenant dispute years ago. She remembered. Yes, he replied quietly, and it deserves better. 3 months later, the trial in London ended swiftly. Phoebe Hawthorne was found guilty of conspiracy and attempted murder. Exile, not execution, was granted by the Crown, a mercy Elliot neither requested nor opposed. Victor Ashford lost his title and fortune. The scandal lingered in society's memory. But so did the image of the Duke who rose. Back at Hawthorne Manor, changes unfolded. Mrs. Bramwell resumed her rightful post. Long-dismissed servants were reinstated. Estate reforms accelerated, not as rigid decrees, but as discussions held openly in the library rather than behind closed doors. And Clara Hartwell no longer wore a maid's uniform. She stood beside the Duke during estate councils, her counsel sought and respected. One winter afternoon, months after the assembly, Elliot found her in the frost-dusted gardens. You have not yet asked for your reward, he said. I did not act for reward. He studied her a long moment. Then allow me to offer something else. She looked at him steadily. Partnership. The word lingered in the crisp air. Not confinement, not ornament, not control. Partnership. Her breath caught just slightly. And if I disagree with you? She asked. Then we shall argue properly, he replied. And if I challenge you? I shall listen. A slow, guarded smile curved her lips, for the first time since the carriage accident. Since betrayal, since humiliation beneath chandeliers, hope did not feel foolish. It felt earned. He extended his hand, not as a master, not as a rescuer, but as a man who had learned. She placed her gloved hand in his. The frost glittered across Hawthorne lands. The North endured, and so did he, not untouched by betrayal, but wiser for it. And this time, he would not mistake silence for loyalty, nor ambition for love.